Kitchen light had been flickering for 3 weeks. I kept meaning to call someone about it, a neighbor, a handyman, anyone. But by the time I'd finished my morning coffee and rinsed my cup in the sink, I'd forget. That was the kind of life I was living then. Small things slipping through the cracks, one after another, until the cracks became the whole floor. My name is Gloria. I'm 68 years old, and I live in a house I bought with my own 2 hands in Asheville, North Carolina, back in 1991. 32 years of mortgage payments, 32 years of replacing water heaters and patching the roof after ice storms and painting the shutters every 5 years because I take pride in what's mine. That house is mine. I want you to remember that, because for a little while, I forgot it myself. My son-in-law's name is Derek. He married my daughter, Simone, 11 years ago in a ceremony at the Botanical Garden downtown. I wore a blue dress and cried happy tears and danced with my late husband's brother because Gerald had passed 2 years before and I refused to sit that dance out. I thought Derek was a good man. He had a firm handshake and remembered people's birthdays and always brought a bottle of wine when he came to dinner. I thought I knew him. Simone is my youngest. She was always the one who needed a little more time to find herself, more time to settle, more time to figure out what she wanted from life. I never held that against her. She has my same jaw and Gerald's eyes, and when she laughs with her whole body. I raised her. I know her better than she thinks I do. They moved in with me in the spring of 2021. COVID had hit their finances hard. Derek had been in hospitality management. He ran operations for a mid-sized hotel chain. And when the industry collapsed, he lost his position. They'd been renting a 2-bedroom apartment in Charlotte, and when the savings ran low and the job offers didn't come, Simone called me on a Sunday night, voice quiet in the way it gets when she's ashamed of something. "Mom," she said, "I need to ask you something." "I already know what you're going to ask," I said. "Come home." I meant it as a kindness. I want to be very clear about that. I meant every single word of it as a kindness. The understanding was simple, the way understandings usually are before they fall apart. They would stay with me while Derek looked for work. They would contribute to groceries. They would give me space, because I had been living alone for 6 years by then and I had my routines. My garden on Tuesday mornings. My book club on the first Thursday of every month. My standing phone call with my sister Elaine every Sunday at 7. My house, my rhythms, my life. And they were guests in it. Welcome ones, but guests. That was the understanding. Derek found a new position 8 months later. Regional operations manager for a smaller company, but the salary was decent and the benefits were good, and I thought finally, they'd start looking for a place of their own. They didn't. Simone said they wanted to save up first, build a cushion. I understood. I'd lived through lean years myself, and I knew what it felt like to be afraid of another fall. So I said, fine, stay a little longer, we'll figure it out. A little longer became another year, and then things started to shift in ways I couldn't quite name at first. Small things. The way Derek started answering the door when people knocked, even when I was closer. The way he'd taken to parking in the center of the garage, my garage, the one I'd had built in 2008, so that I had to squeeze my Buick up against the side wall. The way Simone had rearranged my kitchen cabinets one afternoon while I was at book club, saying she'd made them more functional. And I stood there after coming home and couldn't find my own colander. I told myself I was being sensitive. I told myself that a lot. But then they got a dog without asking me, a large one. A Labrador mix they named Scout, who had no manners and chewed through the leg of a dining room chair that Gerald and I had bought at an estate sale in 1998. When I brought it up, Derek said they'd replace it. They never did. And then Derek's mother started coming to stay on weekends. Her name is Phyllis, and she lives in Knoxville. She is not an unkind woman, but she has the quality of a person who assumes all spaces are for her. She'd sit in my armchair, the green one by the window where I drink my coffee every morning, and she'd have her shows on the television at full volume before I'd even had breakfast. Derek would make her eggs on Saturday mornings in my kitchen, using my pans, and they'd eat together at my table, and sometimes I'd walk in and feel like the visitor. I started eating breakfast in my bedroom. Think about that for a moment. Think about what it means to eat alone in your own bedroom because you don't feel comfortable in your own kitchen. I was sitting with that feeling one evening in November, about 2 years after they'd moved in, when I heard Derek on the phone in the hallway. He didn't know I was in the sitting room. The door was half open, and I'd turned my reading lamp low, and I suppose he thought the room was empty. He was talking to someone, a friend or a colleague, and he was talking about the house. He said, "We've basically got the whole place. She stays out of our way mostly." She. That was me. She. Like I was a shy tenant they were graciously tolerating. I sat very still with my book in my lap, and I did not move for a long time after he hung up. I'd like to tell you that I said something that night. I didn't. I went to bed, and I lay there and I listened to the sounds of my house. The particular creak of the hallway floor, the way the heat kicks on with a soft thud. And I thought about Gerald. I thought about the two of us signing the closing documents at a folding table in a real estate office on Marymount Avenue, my hand shaking a little because it was the biggest thing either of us had ever done. I thought about painting the front porch together on a hot July weekend, Gerald on the ladder and me handing up the brush, both of us laughing about something I can't even remember now. Just laughing. In our house. I didn't sleep that night. Things came to a point the following March. It started with the garden. I have a plot along the south side of the house, about 40 feet long, nothing fancy, just raised beds where I grow tomatoes and peppers and a few herbs. I've had it going for 15 years. It is my peace. Every spring I turn the soil myself, on my hands and knees, and I know every inch of it. Derek decided to extend the back patio. He'd been talking about it for months, and I'd listened with the vague sense that he was talking about someone else's property because he certainly hadn't asked me. He hired a contractor without asking me, and one morning I came outside to find them measuring along the south wall, right where my raised beds sit. I asked the contractor what he was doing. He said, "Extending the patio. Your son asked us to start today." I said, "He's my son-in-law, and this is my property." The contractor looked uncomfortable. He excused himself to make a phone call. I went inside and found Derek in the kitchen. I said, very calmly, "You hired someone to work on my house without asking me." He said, "I was going to run it by you. It's going to increase the property value. It's going to destroy my garden." "Gloria!" he said. And the way he said my name had a particular quality to it. A patience that wasn't really patience. More like the voice you use with someone who's being difficult. You've got to think about the future. What happens to this house eventually? Simone and I are going to need to think about that. I looked at him. I said, "What do you mean by that?" He said, "I just mean we're putting time and energy and money into this place. We should have some say in how it's maintained. Some say. In my house. That I own. That his name is not on." I felt something go very quiet inside me. Not angry, or not just angry. Something colder. Something that had been trying to get my attention for a long time. I said, "Cancel the contractor." He said, "Gloria," I said, "cancel the contractor." And I walked back outside. That night I called my sister Elaine. I told her everything. The phone call I'd overheard, the garage, the kitchen cabinets, the dog, Phyllis in my armchair, the contractor measuring my garden. When I finished talking, Elaine was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You already know what you need to do, Glo. You're just waiting for permission." She was right. The next morning I called my attorney. Her name is Carol Hines, and she's handled my affairs for years. I told her the situation. I told her that I had 2 adults living in my home, rent-free for going on 2 years, and that one of them had begun to speak and act as though he had some claim on the property. Carol listened. Then she said, "Do you want to formalize the arrangement, or do you want to end it?" I thought about Simone. I thought about her laugh, the full-body one. I thought about how she'd looked that Sunday night on the phone, ashamed and quiet, asking to come home. I want to formalize it first, I said, and see what happens. Carol drafted 2 documents. The first was a simple lodger's agreement, month to month, meaning I could end it with 30 days' notice whenever I chose. It outlined that they were guests in the home, not tenants with legal rights to the property, and that any modifications to the home required my written consent. The second was a letter that accompanied it, written in plain language that made clear the terms of their continued stay. I printed both documents myself, at my desk, in my home office, using the printer I have had since 2017. I left them on the kitchen table on a Thursday morning and I went to book club. When I came home, they were both sitting in the living room. Simone looked like she'd been crying. Derek looked like someone who was working very hard to appear calm. Derek spoke first. He said, "We don't think this is necessary." I sat down. I folded my hands in my lap the way my mother taught me when she wanted me to listen without flinching. I said, "I think it is." He said, "We put money into this house." I said, "You haven't, actually, not in any significant way, but if you feel you have, you're welcome to bill me and we can settle it." He said, "Simone grew up here. This is her home too." I looked at my daughter. She didn't look back at me. I said, "Simone grew up here. You didn't. And even Simone, even my own daughter, doesn't own this house. Her name isn't on the deed. Mine is. Has been since 1991. Derek's face changed then. Something beneath the surface of it that I recognized, not because I'd seen it in him before, but because I'd been waiting for it, the thing underneath all the little incremental takings. He said, "So what are you saying? You want us out?" I said, "I'm saying I want you to sign the agreement. I'm saying I want us all to be clear on what this arrangement is. You are guests in my home. You have my love and my daughter's love, and you are welcome here. But you don't have authority over this house, and you never did." He stood up. He said, "I'm not signing anything that treats me like a renter in my own." He stopped himself. He caught it. He knew the moment he heard himself. I said softly, "Finish the sentence." He didn't. Simone asked me that night if we could talk alone. We sat on the back porch, my back porch, the one I'd had repainted 2 summers ago, and for a while neither of us said anything. The yard was dark. The bird feeder I'd put up after Gerald died was a silhouette against the sky. She said, "Mom, I'm sorry." I said, "I know." She said, "I didn't see how bad it had gotten. I think I stopped seeing it." I said, "I know that too." She asked me if I wanted them to leave. I told her the truth, which was that I wanted them to choose if they could live in my home on the actual terms, as guests, with respect, with my consent asked for when decisions needed to be made. Then I would be glad to have them. If Derek couldn't live with that, then they needed to go. She nodded. She didn't say anything else for a long time. Derek did not sign the agreement that night or the next day. He spent 4 days being quiet and stiff around me, eating meals in near silence, and I went about my life. My garden, my book club, my call with Elaine. I was not unkind to him. I was not kind to him. I was not cold. I was simply myself, in my own home, living as I always had, and I was not moving. On the 5th day, he slid the signed agreement under my bedroom door in the morning. I picked it up. I read it through. Both signatures were there. I made myself a cup of coffee and I sat in my green armchair and I watched the birds at the feeder for a while. Things were different after that, but different in the way that a room is different when you've opened the windows. The same room, the same furniture, the same walls, but the air has changed. Derek was quieter in a way that had some respect in it, or at least the beginning of it. He stopped having Phyllis to stay every weekend. He started actually asking, before making plans that involved the house. Once, a few months later, he came to me about a repair the gutters needed and asked if I wanted to get it done or if he should call someone, and I said I'd handle it, and he said okay. Just okay. No argument. No suggestions about what would be better for the property value. Simone and I found our way back to each other more slowly. It took a few months before our conversations felt easy again, before she stopped looking at me with that layer of guilt sitting over everything. But one morning in the fall, she came out to the garden while I was turning the soil, and she knelt down beside me without being asked, and we worked alongside each other for an hour without talking much, and it felt like something settling back into place. They're still here. That might surprise you, but they're looking at properties now, talking about pre-qualifying for a mortgage, looking at neighborhoods in West Asheville. It'll happen in its own time, and when it does, I'll be glad for them, and I'll probably stand in my kitchen and cry a little because she's still my daughter. But I'll be standing in my kitchen. I've been thinking lately about what I would tell another woman in the same position. A mother, or a mother-in-law, or a grandmother, or just a woman who let someone in out of love and looked up one day and found that the space she'd given was the whole room. I'd tell her, the kindness that asks nothing of itself isn't kindness. It's just surrender, and you can love people completely, your whole heart, every bit of it, and still refuse to disappear inside your own home. That kitchen light finally stopped flickering, by the way. Turned out it just needed a new switch. I fixed it myself on a Saturday morning, standing on my step stool in my kitchen in my house. The light's been steady ever since. I've had a long time to think about how things unfolded in that house. Not with bitterness. I want to be clear about that. But with the kind of honesty that only comes when you've stopped being afraid of what the truth costs you. What Derek didn't happen all at once. That's the part nobody tells you about. It wasn't one big betrayal. It was 100 small ones, each so minor on its own that I could always find a reason to let it go. The garage, the cabinets, the dog, Phyllis in my chair. Every time I stayed quiet, I was teaching him something. I was teaching him that this space had no real edge to it, that he could keep walking forward and I would keep stepping back. I did that. I have to own that part. And Simone, my own daughter, who I would do anything for. She stopped seeing it because I made it too easy not to see. When you absorb everything without naming it, the people who love you learn to look the other way. Not because they're cruel, because you've trained them to believe you're fine. That's the thing about letting things slide for too long. It isn't kindness. It feels like kindness from the inside. But what it actually is, if you're willing to sit with it, is a slow erasure of yourself. I was disappearing, eating breakfast in my own bedroom, walking around my own kitchen like I needed permission, and I'd done it so quietly that nobody even noticed, including me. What changed things wasn't the contractor measuring my garden. That was just the moment I finally let myself see what I'd been watching for 2 years. The clarity was already there. I just had to stop arguing myself out of it. I called Carol. I sat down at my desk. I printed 2 documents on my own printer in my own office. And I understood, maybe for the first time in those 2 years, that having the right to something means nothing if you're not willing to say so out loud. Derek was a smart man. He knew exactly what he was doing when he stopped mid-sentence. When he caught himself about to say my own home and heard how wrong it sounded. Intelligence without integrity doesn't get you far. Not really. It just gets you further down a road you're eventually going to have to walk back. And Simone, kneeling beside me in the garden that fall morning, hands in the dirt, that was her finding her way back too. Not just to me. To herself. To the daughter who knew the difference between loyalty to a husband and complicity in something wrong. I think about what it took to get there. The grit of staying calm at that kitchen table. The discipline of not moving, not softening, not finding one more reason to let it go. That steadiness didn't come from anger. It came from knowing, finally, clearly, who I was and what was mine. Nobody gives you that. You have to decide it for yourself. Sometimes in a quiet room at 2 a.m, sometimes standing at your own counter in your own house, asking yourself how long you're willing to be invisible. I wasn't willing anymore. The light in my kitchen is steady now. So am I.